Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Radium and today I have a Calamity mod playthrough for all of you where I share my experiences with spending 100 days in Deathmode. And I have to say, I think I did the most bizarre playthrough to ever exist. However, before we get into the actual content of the video, let me explain some stuff and the basic rules. A Terraria day is 24 minutes long, 15 minutes at daytime and 9 at night. That means for 100 days you have 2400 minutes of playtime, which equivocates to 40 hours. Now, for this playthrough, any time-changing items such as the Cosmolite and Enchanted Sundial can be used, but they do skip time, so I shouldn't use them often. Lastly, my character is already given two items, a Cosmolite and a Gold Watch. The Cosmolite will be used at the beginning to signal the start of day one, then it will be instantly removed. The Gold Watch also just helps me record the video in smaller segments. Okay, with all of that said, I suppose let's get into the video. My day one consisted of starting off with a Cosmolite usage, which is instantly trashed. This gives me the full 24 minutes a regular Terraria day has, rather than the first night, which is slightly less. The Gold Watch helps me gauge the length of my footage as well. So first off, you'll notice how I activate not only Deathmode, but also Defiled Rune. This is because Defiled increases drop chance of rare items sometimes, which plays into this ridiculous strategy. Anyway, the first thing I want to do is immediately dive into the underground desert. Normally this is a death sentence, but I won't need to be down here for long. My reason for doing this is to locate some mandible weapons, fantastic and diverse weapons similar to gold and platinum tier items, but that isn't all of it. I will be killing storm lions at a single Synedrian in my first 6 minutes hopefully, then going back. The Synedrian spawned in an incredible spot, and so I got to chipping away at his health with the squirrel summon, staying completely safe. As I kill the Synedrian, the goal is to get 2 of each drop to craft 2 Victide bars, as well as an Immediate Spark, and luckily, my first kill yields me both of those items. Another Antlion drops me the Mandible Bow, a weapon that will carry me through the Desert Scourge. Lastly down here, the Stormjaw Staff is dropped and my starter equipment is almost complete. Immediately I begin thinking of which weapon I want to use, but settled on the Seashell Boomerang since it has great DPS and knockback. My main incentive for spelunking in the treacherous deserts so early on comes down to one reason: bats. Cave, ice and jungle bats are instant death in Deathmode, unless you have a strong enough weapon. So another option to my method as an alternative would be looking for sword shrines or a water bolt at the dungeon. The first cavernous chests yield me some fantastic early game items, such as a jump bottle, Hermes boots and a magic mirror. No weapons interest me right now, but gems for a grapple is neat, even though I'm shooting for a diamond hook by the end of the series. Life crystals are important as I want to get a goblin army within the first 10 days, and also to help me beat bosses as I am a little rusty right now. Anyways, I got slightly overconfident and tried my King Slime attempt, before forgetting his size increase in Deathmode. I'll give it another go in a moment though. Even though a water bolt couldn't be found at my dungeon, the Sulphurous Sea gives me access to some amazing buffs and some money, and although I won't be returning for a while, it's nice to pick some stuff up. Lastly on day one, I created a new character, opened the treasure bag and dropped off the slime crown before returning to the main character. This is allowed as it still uses up some of my overall time, and making new characters is a resource worth using sometimes. Anyways, it's a tough battle with the Topaz Hook being subpar, and the Seashell Boomerang struggling to hit the boss as he gets smaller, but we come out on top to conclude day one. The King Slime treasure bag gave me some ninja armor and a slimy saddle, so that's a pretty good turnout. After that, I immediately began flattening out my desert to fight the Desert Scourge in. Sadly, I wouldn't beat the boss on day 2, as I only racked up 2 losses from it. My next play, however, was to go to the Crimson and smash some Crimson Hearts, and potentially steal some tissue samples from the Marine. But as I went to do the fight, a Cromulon Blight slime pushed me down a flight of stairs basically, and finished me off before I could get a single tissue sample. Apart from that, I crafted the Prison Builder from Louis AFK, and this is an example of an item I solely crafted to speed up miscellaneous tasks. And, wow, that's pretty much the end of day 2, so not as much as day 1, but if we don't have some of these less exciting days, then this video will take forever. Day 3 began with several life crystals being located while spelunking, which was really nice because I was already struggling with a lack of HP at this stage. Apart from the mindless looting, I decided to visit the left side of the world's ocean to find some more chests. The original idea for traversing the world was locating the meteor that had dropped in the previous night. I couldn't find the footage of the message popping up sadly. After mining the entire thing up, I crafted the full meteor set, the space gun and the meteor hand axe, and so I decided that I was to play mage in this challenge. That's about everything concerning day 3.
As day 4 began, I was determined to defeat the Desert Scourge. The space gun really helped with consistent DPS, as I had to be conservative with my Jester arrows, but even so this ended up as a close battle. My main takeaway from this is that I need to get a much better grappling hook very soon. However, as soon as the Scourge fell, I instantly went to the Sunken Sea to challenge the giant clam. Amedius, the NPC concealed within the mollusk, sells an incredible tome for early Calamity, the Way Washer, and since the clam is easy, I figured it would be worth doing. The only other thing I did was head to the jungle for some more loot, and ended up finding an enchanted sword from a cosmic elemental, and hastily died afterwards, ending day 4. Day 5 began with me finishing the Elevator entirely. However, the true excitement of this day came from the Draydon base in the ice caverns, as the chest guarded by some crappy lasers gave me a blizzard in a balloon. An absolutely amazing accessory I'd pretty much carried through all the way to the Moonlord. Aside from that and finding a few odd life crystals, there wasn't really all that much to this day. My first mission for day 6 was crafting the platform builder from Louis AFK to massively speed up arena construction. I can see why some people would call this illegitimate, but I feel it is fine to use personally. Apart from that, I used the gravitation potions from Draydon's lab to find some sky islands and loot. And lastly, I challenged the Eye of Cthulhu to a battle for the sake of his shield. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I believe the Shield of Cthulhu to be one of the best accessories in the game, and I still stand by that reasoning. By the way, not that it means all that much, but I did accidentally no-hit Deathmode Eye of Cthulhu, so that happened in the 100 days, I guess. The highlight for day 7 occurred the frame it began. A goblin army was approaching. This event had complied to my schedule and arrived earlier than needed, which made it slightly hard to rid of, but not exactly impossible. However, the main challenge for today was ridding the Crimson of the Perforator Hive and the Brain of Cthulhu. I know it's quite a drastic skip, but it was one I felt like doing. The Perforator is easy enough, as the fight is easy to control if you have good spatial awareness, and then it's just a matter of well-timed attacks and adrenaline usage. The main incentive for fighting this boss is Aerialite Ore, as there is a magic weapon I would love to wield for the rest of pre-hard mode, which is crafted from it. As the boss falls, I quickly craft myself the Bloodbath, another great addition to my magical roster. On that note, the Brain of Cthulhu is summoned and, he doesn't stand a chance, just gotta be honest. Any of my weapons could have worked for this fight as I steamroll it with my powerful loot. And the day concluded with me mining some Aerialite. Day 8 began with farming for some feathers and planetoids for life crystals. This was for the construction of the Trade Winds, my favourite pre-hard mode magic weapon. Wielding this new amazing item, I spent the rest of the day preparing for a Skeletron battle, and although I struggled a little bit due to being slightly rusty, I did manage to defeat the boss in my first attempt, unlocking my dungeon. Normally in Calamity, if I'm doing a playthrough, I wouldn't even challenge Skeletron this early. I'd most likely do it in hard mode since I never really use any items from the dungeon. But in this occasion, since I'm trying to follow linear progression, I did so. A few minutes of dungeon exploration yielded nothing, so instead I began purchasing mobility items from the Tinkerer and found the Goblin Tinkerer, with the goal of crafting the bundle of balloons. With this new amazing mobility, I was finally ready to take on the Slime God, a boss that is very tricky for newer players, but is really easy once you understand it. Its defeat served as a positive conclusion to the single-digit days in this challenge, which brings us to the 10% mark. For day 10, I have a fun fact for all of you. The Wall of Flesh is absolute arse in death mode. As of such, using the platform builder in Louis AFK pretty much makes this fight free. I got very unlucky with the boss's positioning, but I still managed to defeat the wall, just before he killed me in fact. And so hard mode has been activated in double-digit days. first thing I did in hard mode was fight King Slime beneath the underground Hallow or Crimson, to farm for Souls of Night and Light for the rest of the day. Since it was raining, I farmed for the Nimbus Rod to start with on day 11. Then I located the Wizard, an amazing NPC for early hard mode this run. Buying spell tomes allowed me to craft both the Crystal Storm and the Golden Shower, but that's pretty much where my luck ran out. As I was farming for light shards for the Sky Fracture, a Blood Moon spawned. As I hadn't crafted Ultimate Peaceful quite yet, this was pretty much just a wasted 9 minutes. A rookie mistake I made. Day 12 started with farming up the hard mode ore tiers so I could get an Orichalcum Anvil to craft the Sky Fracture, a fantastic weapon. Even though I'm farming for these ores, I'm not going to be making any armor or weapons out of these, just pickaxes and the Orichalcum Anvil as well as the Titanium Forge. I wanted to see where I was at in terms of progression, so I fought the twins, and although I had one decent attempt, my mobility is still severely lacking. On day 13, I set out to defeat Cryogen, who serves as a transition boss from pre-hard mode to hard mode in terms of difficulty. I have fought him because this boss yields me so many helpful items, and the Soul of Cryogen, some wings with good offensive bonuses to them. Additionally, I have unlocked the ability to craft Daedalus armor from my victory, which I'll spend the remainder of the day farming for. On day 14, I started mining cryonic ore to craft the Daedalus armor, and paired with the Soul of Cryogen, I was prepared to fight the twins again. They were still very difficult as I'm not the best at the fight, but I came out on top thanks to my fantastic damage and ability to recover due to my increased defense. With them defeated, I can begin really progressing in hard mode. Day 15 was mixed in terms of its success. I challenged the Brimstone Elemental, which was a successful fight that took about 6 minutes to complete, and I came to the conclusion that I needed a weapon upgrade. Although I crafted a lot of good vanilla weapons, I needed a new piercing and DPS weapon. I'm not allowing myself the Relic of Ruin, by the way, because it is so incredibly good that I'd have no need for weapon upgrades until Golem. Anyways, the Brimstone Elemental was really difficult here because it was slightly enraged, and so I barely won the fight. Apart from that, the entire night of this day was wasted on a Calamitous attempt, because I didn't have enough damage. Although I wanted to get revenge on day 16, I needed to wait till nighttime for another Calamitous fight, so I decided to clear out the Acid Rain and fight the Aquatic Scourge. It's an easy fight with a piercing weapon, and the boss seems to have slowed down quite a bit, which makes it feel a lot more fair. My other reasons for doing this fight was getting the Deep Sea Staff and the Downpour, two weapons that would have helped against Calamitous and also the remaining mech bosses, but I had no such luck. Regardless of that, the Calamitous fight was a long one, as I barely finished the fight as the night ended, but I would not call this a hard one. This is one of those bosses that becomes really easy once you no-hit it, whereas some bosses remain inconsistent, but it's still one of my favourite fights in the mod. Now, I know that some of you might be surprised that I'm fighting Calamitous so early on, as this is kind of a staple boss for pretty much being halfway through the game, and we are only at day 16, but let me just tell you now, the progression hasn't even started getting ridiculous quite yet. We've literally only just begun in this thing, and if you think this is insane, just wait till some of the later segments, it will genuinely break your mind. I spent the first half of day 17 farming for potions from the Brewer NPC, and then focused on taking down the remaining mechanical bosses. I didn't realise how powerful the Nimbus Rod truly was, as its paired with the Golden Shower annihilated the Deathmode Destroyer. This fight is normally my least favourite mechanical boss, as it feels somewhat cheap in my opinion, but here it was a piece of cake, and the Souls of Might are invaluable souls to have. To contrast that, I really like Deathmode Skeleton Prime as his fight is really unique, but somewhat easy and well balanced comparatively. With all 3 mechanical bosses defeated, a mechanical cart and pickaxe axe were crafted, but I finally had the resources required for a new weapon, one that would make me so much stronger, the Valkyrie Ray. This thing literally eats through bosses with multiple segments, making it a fantastic choice in Calamity. Day 18 might have been the most successful day in the 100 days actually. While farming for money via aquatic scourges, I came to the conclusion that I needed a Rod of Discord for Plantera, and within minutes of farming for it, I had myself the normally elusive rod. With it, a small and scruffy arena constructed with a few dynamites would be enough to take care of this boss. I am actually not a fan of this fight, because the issue with Deathmode Plantera is that in order to make an arena large enough to fight the boss in, you have to destroy the blocks that make it a jungle biome, and so Plantera is always enraged in the middle. The rod helps this, however, because the speed of the boss becomes irrelevant if you can teleport. With this boss defeated, I instantly crafted myself the Terraria, as I had most ingredients for Knight's Ray lying about, and the living shards were now mine. And with this ridiculously powerful stave in my possession, I fought Golem. This fight is difficult in Deathmode because of the head's movements directly complementing the body's attacks, but once the head is destroyed it becomes free. It was really another little fun battle to do, and I've pretty much unlocked all content in the game up to the Moonlord now. Even though Golem has fallen, I had one crazy idea left for this day. I wanted to attempt the Ravager. This fight would actually cut into day 19 a little, but since the fight started on day 18, I will count it. This is normally a ridiculously hard fight that you really need to prepare for, but thanks to the buff potions I farmed or thanks to the Aquatic Scourge, I had every regeneration buff in Vanilla and Calamity, boosting my recovery time immensely. This alone was enough to tip the tides on the boss, as I could take as long as I needed in order to win this. Day 19 began with picking up a Spectre Staff from the Wizard, as it receives a massive buff in Calamity. Now, I accidentally summoned an Alistair whilst farming for pirate maps, but since I barely survived getting out of the ocean, I figured it would be worth a shot, and this fight ended up being a very close one. The Spectre Staff proved its worth as it shredded through both bosses in the fight, but the final enraged state of the Leviathan was still actually enough to kill me. I just happened to do so as well. Next up, I made a really bizarre discovery as I went to the Astral Biome to challenge Astrum Aureus. The Astral Meteor had actually fallen in a 2x2 hole, so summoning the boss was really difficult, but apart from that, the fight itself was very easy. This is a boss that struggles against mobile players, so if you shoot for an early Duke Fishron, this fight is practically free. With all of that said, that concludes day 19. For day 20, I wanted to defeat Fishron a little earlier than intended, as his drops are insane for Mage, so I farmed for a Truffle Worm and gave the fight a shot. I am very surprised that my skill in this fight has deteriorated as fast as it did, as I no-hit this boss relatively recently with much worse gear. However, the fight was still technically a success despite my lackluster ability. I feel that Master Mode Duke's Fishron's AI should function like Death Mode's, as being able to shoot out Cthulhu Nados while dashing makes it so much harder to dodge.
Anyways, after the victorious attempt, I needed the fish from wings, so I spent some platinum on treasure bags and just happened to get them. I decided that with this power up, I should fight the lunatic cultist, as I believe the Spectre Staff to be enough to defeat the Moonlord at this stage. The fight was short and simple, as the boss always is. I used to find the Deathmode changes really hard, but after several playthroughs I just don't see how I struggled at it. Lastly on the day, I took out the Vortex and Stardust Pillars, just in time for day 21. Although I killed the Solar Pillar very early on, I wanted to kill the Plaguebringer Goliath before the Moonlord, and so I got to my least favourite boss in Calamity. This fight is honestly so bad in comparison to pretty much everything around it, but I didn't want to forget about it, so I did it here. The end of this battle is one of the weirdest finales in the 100 days, and I do notice that I actually keep dying with the boss, which is really bizarre, but I'll take it if I don't have to do this miserable fight anymore. As the nebula filler fell, it was apparent that the Moonlord was dying soon, and although I passed away a few times due to lack of practice, I managed to finally get the golden attempt and take the victory, putting myself in endgame Calamity, being only a fifth of the way through my time. Day 22 served as the calm after the storm. I bought treasure bags and managed to get myself the Lunar Flare, which would help me easily defeat the Martian invasion for the Xenopopper. This weapon was needed in a crafting tree for the best mage weapon pre-Providence, an item I would potentially use for the next several bosses, the Effervescence. With this ridiculously powerful weapon in hand, I spent the rest of the day farming for Unholy Essence, and a couple more Moonlord kills for money and Luminite. On day 23, the goal was defeating the Profane Guardians, Providence, and the Stormweaver, and getting myself some armor upgrades. The Guardians are easy as always, but then again their only purpose is obtaining the Profane Core to fight Providence. I also crafted myself the non-consumable Profane Core for the sake of farming the boss later on, as it is a great fight for money. The fight itself is actually very difficult, but if you have seen my channel in the recent months, you'll know that I have invested over 5 hours into trying to no-hit this fight, so regularly fighting it is an absolute breeze. The only difficult part for me, in fact, is the last 30% after the Profane Guardians are summoned and defeated, as her attacks become much more ruthless. Anyways, after a successful Providence attempt, I immediately got to farming Eula Bloom since I wanted the Tarragon armor and the Bio Fusillade for weapon diversity. I bought another Providence treasure bag for the Divine Geodes and voila! I finally get to use another armor set other than Daedalus. Next up, it was time for the Stormweaver, who I really wasn't concerned about. It's just kind of a fight that happens, but I still managed to die at the end of it, concluding day 23. Cygnus and the Ceaseless Void were the targets for day 24, and I successfully got both of them.
Cygnus was actually the easiest of the Sentinels, mainly because the other bosses are much more inconsistent. The main goal for defeating these bosses this early on, by the way, was to craft a Cosmic Worm and go for the Devourer of Gods the second we defeat Poltergust, who would actually turn out to be the hardest boss in this entire playthrough. The reason I wanted to defeat Poltergust wasn't even Bloodflare armor, it was the Phantasmal Fury, an amazing magic weapon that is, in my opinion, the best choice against the Devourer of Gods. I didn't really need to craft many more weapons after that for the entire playthrough, as I am being minimalistic to save time. Despite day 25 being quite significant, as it represents us being a quarter of the way through this challenge, I actually did nothing too spectacular on this day, just farming Phantoplasm and building the Poltergust arena. So yeah, that's literally the entire 24 minutes. Whilst the Poltergust fight rolls out, I really want to discuss how good I think these new changes are, because previously in updates of Calamity and versions of Calamity I've played before this, Poltergust's AI seemed really cheap. Occasionally in the fight he would just kind of stick to you, and pretty much instantly kill you, which I found really stupid. But in this version of the game, or the new update I should say, the boss is so much nicer. His AI functions very differently, he now has dash attacks rather than just following you like Plantera does, and I personally really like this, so the only issue still with the fight is that the ghost seems to enrage randomly, and this arena is a full dungeon, so maybe it's on my end rather than the game's, but I do think there are still a couple of bugs to be fixed with this fight. But overall it's still a massive improvement. Okay, now that I've complimented the fight, it's time to talk about the difficulty of it. Because as I said previously, this was the hardest fight in pretty much the game. Now I spent a good while practicing this fight beforehand because I knew this was going to be a difficult one and I didn't want to waste a couple of days on this fight. So one thing I did throughout this playthrough actually was practice bosses via alternate accounts. But I don't think that's cheating because I did not do them related to my character or the world, just so I knew what I was going into basically. With this method I was pretty much able to steamroll this boss within 5 attempts, but the boss was still very inconsistent despite me liking the fight now. With that done, I had the Ruinous Souls to craft the Phantasmal Fury, which, as I said previously, is going to be my weapon for the Devourer of Gods. And there was no time like the present to begin that fight, because I didn't really see the point in upgrading my wings, my accessories, or my armor. Although I didn't first try the Devourer of Gods, it was still a very fun fight that I did relatively quickly, and I beat it within 10 minutes of doing Poltergust. The only issue with this fight is still the fact that you get one shot in Deathmode, but the AI also seems slightly less inconsistent, as randomly before, the Devourer of Gods would just go incredibly quick and accelerate across your screen, potentially killing you in some cases. But this version of the boss seems to be a lot less ridiculous in that sense. Now, I'm just going to say ahead of time that this is where my progression really starts going off the rails, because after this fight I've unlocked the ability to craft Godslayer armor, which is crafted from endothermic energy and nightmare fuel. But the thing with that is the events that happened when the next day started, which really interested me. Now, I had no intention of doing some ridiculous skip, but things the events kind of fell into place, and so I figured I'd seize the opportunity to do something ridiculous. And yeah, that concludes day 26. Day 27 started rather strongly. From the Devourer's treasure bag, I got the Death Hail Staff, which allowed me to initiate an incredible skip. I fought Dragon Folly and easily won, gaining the effulgent feathers to craft the Dragon Egg, and then easily defeating Phase 1 Yaren. And just so you all know, Yaren is the fighting Calamity that I am the best at, having no-hit it and invested over 1500 attempts into the fight in Armageddon. Unlocking the power of the Dark Sun came from this battle, and so I got to farming the Solar Eclipse for Dark Sun fragments, which just happened to be in play already. Then I fought Arstrom Dias for the Starfall, and combined it with the Relic of Ruin and the Nuclear Fury, and so the Event Horizon was created. This weapon is my personal favourite magic weapon in Calamity, as I used it to no-hit Yaren originally. Anyways, I bet you'll struggle to believe that I beat Yaren both times first try, but I did. This fight is literally ingrained into my memory forever now, because of the ridiculous amount of time I spent on it. It is a fun fight, however, so I do hope you enjoy the remainder of this battle. Day 28 began with me fighting the old Duke, a boss that I normally skip because I am really bad at. I just can't really be bothered to learn it. But in my opinion, it is a pretty fun fight, and I really do want to do it more. It's just a shame that it's so much harder than everything else around it. After that, the remainder of the day was dedicated to farming for Auric Tesla. This is a massive process because Auric Tesla bars have so many ingredients to the recipe, so I spent a lot of time doing this, and I only got about halfway through the recipe for a single bar. Day 29 was the first time I had access to a Draydon's Forge throughout the entire playthrough. This allowed me to actually construct endgame items rather than just farm for the materials used to make the bars, as this serves as the final crafting station I'll ever use. After I had the Auric Tesla bar, I began farming for items like the Psychotic Amulet, the Flying Carpet, and the Lead Core, as well as the Frost Barrier to make the Auric Tesla armor. This was a really annoying process to do, and it took about 10 minutes, but honestly, I remember it being much worse than this, so I'm fine with it being a long process. And the final thing I did was farm for the Augur of the Elements, the Light God's Brilliance, and used my Event Horizon additionally to craft the Subsuming Vortex. An absolutely incredible weapon that is pretty much going to carry me through Supreme Calamitous. Although it has been changed slightly and it's not as good as it once was in my opinion, it's still a really neat weapon to use.
Now, you may be thinking, it's day 30 and I've beaten Calamity in Deathmode. This is a really bizarre achievement, but the thing is, there's actually a lot more content in the game. As of such, I'm going to be using the rest of the days to farm for rare items, do some ridiculous challenges, and maybe improve my world slightly, because I'm still living in boxes, basically, with little to no organisation. So, this is personally how I like to do my playthroughs, as I do everything after doing it, if that makes sense. And although a lot of people prep every stage along the way, this is something I like to do. Days 31 to 36 were spent farming up for the materials required to craft Demon Shade armor and accessories I skipped out on. And although I crafted more than these items, these are one of the 3 groups that I'd consider the most important. Next up, days 36 to 44 were designated to the Halibut Cannon, an item with a 1 in 10,000 drop chance. Now, I actually got very unlucky with this, as I believe I killed over 25,000 enemies before I got my Halibut Cannon. But I'm still very grateful to finally have gotten this thing. It's an amazing DPS weapon, and in case you're ever challenging an enemy with high defense, it's pretty much got the best like Dungeon Guardian attack damage in the game. Between days 45 and 48, I spent time farming for the Cosmic Discharge to craft the Apotheosis, a ridiculously powerful endgame weapon. After this, I decided I would challenge Terminus, and although I can't include the entirety of Terminus in this video, here's a montage of me killing every single boss in about 30 seconds. Oh yeah, and I need to explain something regarding Terminus. So whilst the event is active, because some bosses can only be spawned in at night, the Terminus item automatically changes the day and night cycle. So instead of adding a ridiculous amount of days because of the amount of flashes there are, I've decided that every time I do Terminus, it's going to count for 3 days. Which is why I've done it from day 45 to 48 in this case. After this, days 49 to 67 were spent farming up money to buy treasure bags for legendary weapons. Over 6,000 platinum coins were put towards these treasure bags, and over the course of 14 days of money farming, opening bags and auto-trashing, every single legendary item in the game was obtained. With that done, there are 2 more items I would like to farm for. The purpose of days 68 to 77 were farming for either the Void Vortex or the Yoram's Crystal. Now, I wasn't too annoyed that if I didn't get one of them, because these items were incredibly hard to get, and Yoram is very inefficient to farm. But regardless, I managed to get myself the Void Vortex, obviously not the cool one, because the Yoram's Crystal, in my opinion, is slightly better, but I'm just happy to get one of these rare weapons. And now we are officially entering the last 5 days of this video. Now, I wanted to do something ridiculously hard, and so I figured the most difficult enemy in Calamity should be my final target, the Eidolon Worm. Now, I experimented with different weapons, but I couldn't find anything that did good damage, and so I resorted to a very commonly used weapon for killing this guy, the Cold Heart Icicle. This thing reduces the percentage of the health of the enemy you are fighting by 2% regardless of their defense, health, or damage reduction, which makes it perfect for this scenario. The fight still takes a while because in order to use it requires you to get hit, and then I need to recover all of my HP because the Eidolon Worm pretty much wipes out all of your health in a single blow regardless of how powerful you are. So that was an issue, but after 20 minutes had passed, I had officially defeated the Eidolon Worm. This would have been a very cool strategy to do earlier on, maybe get myself like an early Soul Edge or Halibut Cannon, and just steamroll early hard mode. However, I've never done this before, hence why I didn't think of the idea, and it's honestly just a cool thing to do for the end of the playthrough. It's quite a good finale in my opinion. And this is where this journey ends. Now, I know that's kind of an anticlimactic finish because technically I still had 2 days left, But honestly, I kind of just idled around in my world and looked around, remorsing about where I'd spent my last 40 hours, basically. And honestly, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to be rushing every single second of your life. And I know that's kind of ironic coming from me, because that's all I really did with this playthrough. But I still had a really good time with it, and it was a really refreshing experience just being able to play Calamity with no restrictions. So I hope all of you enjoyed this video as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.